Alright everybody, this is going to be a quick tutorial on how to change oil. I have a 2017 Chevy Volt up above me, which is a gas-powered and an electric-powered vehicle. The gas-powered engine, for the most part, does nothing but charge the batteries if the battery runs low. It does at higher speeds take control a little, I believe, of the transmission, which isn't actually a transmission, but we'll get into that later. Right now it's just a basic oil change. So we have the oil pan here, the oil drain plug here, and the oil filter here. So, basic tools for this one, and this is something that you should always have ready before you get underneath. You should know what you need, or at least take a quick look, get what you need, and come back. In a dealership or most other places, you get to leave 15 minutes to do an oil change. That includes changing the oil, putting it back in, by the way, and checking everything else around. It's called a quick visual check. This is where most dealerships will make their money. So it's very important for you to check the vehicle over well, otherwise the dealership or wherever you're working isn't going to make much money, because basically the oil change is to get the customer in. So in this case, I am using a 3/8 ratchet with a swivel head with a 3/8 drive 15mm socket. Alright, so I'm going to continuously go over what I'm using so you can get used to the terminology, though we will be going over tools also later. So we have the drain plug here, we have the oil filter here, we have an oil drain bucket here, okay? You'll notice the one thing I am wearing right now is rubber gloves. These are worn all the time. Alright, I should be wearing my safety glasses, but right now to do the video I find it better not to. Doing an oil change, the oil should be somewhat hot, not so hot that you're going to burn yourself. If you're in a Jiffy Lube or something like that, you don't have much of a choice. That's a speed thing. So you just have to be careful not to get the oil on yourself. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to just loosen the nut up. I know that looked a little bit easy. I was under here prior just to make sure I wasn't going to have any problems. So she loosened up quite easily. So we're going to put that down. By the way, one other thing I would have to say about the tools, if I can get it here. This is a 6-point socket, okay? Try to use those on oil drain plugs, otherwise you will strip the plug, and that is never a good thing. So with the oil drain bucket, you want to try to get it as close as you can so it's not going to splash out at you. Get it in here, start turning this. You'll notice some of the oil's already starting to come out before it's even 3/4 of the way on turn. That's the reason for the rubber gloves. I have oil on my gloves, not on my hands. So it's already draining. I'm going to let it sit like that for a minute. I'm going to go grab some rags to wipe off. Another thing you should have on you, this is a quick video. I wasn't sure if I was going to do it or not, so I didn't grab the paper towel. But I'll let that drain in the meantime, and I'll be right back. Alright, so I got the rag. It's still draining. I'm going to unscrew the bolt just a little bit more. So you can let the bolt drop into the pan. There is a screen in the bottom of the pan, so you do not lose the bolt. Sometimes you can grab it, sometimes you can't. Try to keep yourself clean. It's really bad if you're talking to a customer or even anybody else and you have oil all over the front of you. So it's just easier to let the plug drop into the pan than it is to make a mess of yourself. So you're just going to let that completely drain out. And when I say completely, I don't mean go out for 20 minutes and let it drip. It's flowing at a good rate right now. When it actually stops flowing and it stops to make a drip or even a really, really thin line, you're pretty much done after that. Remember, that 15 minutes is key. This is not done in 15 minutes, by the way, because I'm talking to you. Meanwhile, while that's draining, I'm going to show you the wrench. So this is an oil filter wrench. There are many styles of this, okay? This right now, once again, I got a 3/8 ratchet on a 3/8 6-inch extension, which is right here, with a band type of oil filter wrench. Not my favorite style, but it was something quick at hand. So when you go to turn the filter, as you can tell, it actually crunches down on the oil filter, then you can turn it. Okay. Some oil filters have little teeth in the bottom of them. This actually does right here. They'll actually have a cup that goes on it. It's like a huge socket that you can turn the oil filter with. That is also not a bad idea to use that. That's one of my best recommended ones. The only problem with those is, unless you're at a dealership, each filter is usually a different size. That means that thing's a different size. That means you're going to have a lot of those. The universal one, for the most part, seems to work pretty good. So right now, still got a drip, but most of it's coming out. So we're going to say that looks pretty good. Before I put it back on, you're going to inspect the drain plug. First, to make sure that the head of it isn't completely stripped, which it's not. Second of all, there should be some sort of a gasket on here. Different style manufacturers will use a different gasket. In this particular case, the GM has the one that's inserted. It's a piece of rubber. It does not look in bad condition. I would still recommend to change these once in a while. With a Chevy Volt, it's recommended to change the oil once a year, no matter what the mileage is. Because sometimes, especially with an electric vehicle of this, it may never turn the engine on, except for once a year when it goes into maintenance mode to get rid of the gasoline. But oil sitting around will collect water just from temperature related issues. So an oil change once a year is always a good thing, no matter the mileage. The actual mileage that you can put on a car in between oil changes isn't as cut and dry as what the dealer says. It also is what type of oil you use. You have regular oil and you have synthetic motor oil. Synthetic you can get more mileage out of. Unfortunately enough, no more time, just mileage. So when you tighten it good, this is where it comes into a feeling. There is a torque spec, which we'll get into what torque specs are more later. Basically, the dealership will give you how tight you're supposed to tighten something. In an oil change, you could if you wanted to. That's kind of a little bit of an overkill. Just make sure it's nice and snug. Don't over tighten it. So once again with the oil filter, grab it, get up here, get it in a nice comfortable position, tighten it, make the turn. You might have to use it once or twice. After that, it pretty much should come out by your hand. So we've all experienced ones that are so tight it's absolutely ridiculous to get off. That is someone who used that wrench or another wrench to tighten the filter back up. That's not suggested. Right back. Alright, so here's the new oil filter. So the thing I'm going to say about oil filters and pots in general, I like using factory. I am not an aftermarket fan. When I cannot use factory or it's not easily available, I will get aftermarket parts. I am not going to say one's better than the other. I'm not going to get into that debate right now. I'm just saying when you can use factory parts. in this particular instance with the school that we have, it's not readily available to get factory parts. So you pretty much use what you can get. So as far as I know, from what I read with the Chevy Bolt, is it is recommended to use a fully synthetic motor oil. So, like I said before, we will get into the properties of what makes synthetic synthetic and what makes normal oil normal oil. If you asked me a while ago, I would have told you there's no difference between them. Then I worked for a police department for 15 years, and I saw the continuous beating that the cars took running, never getting shut off. And I will tell you right now, there is definitely a big difference between regular oil and synthetic motor oil. Your everyday person who drives back and forth to work, maybe not as much. But to me, if I could notice that much of a difference, because the police cars would take that much of a beating, that means your everyday driver is still taking a beating, just not as much. So I highly recommend the extra money on synthetic. Not a sales pitch, just experience. So I am adding a little bit of oil to the oil filter. In a lot of instances, this is not something you can do anymore, because when you tip the oil filter sideways, it's all going to pour out anyway. I do have the option, it does point straight down, which is helpful. I do put a little bit of oil on the seal. Try to use the new oil. If you can't, because you're at a dealership with a pump, the old oil quickly on the top of it will be fine. Remember, you're still trying to beat that 15 minutes. To walk over there, to grab the little pump or something like that, to put a little bit of oil on, and literally you can just stick your finger over there, grab some and put it here, it's a time saver. Alright, so when you pull an oil filter off, some oil is going to drip all over the place. Once again, trying to get yourself all disgusting. If you've noticed, I'm not even in automotive clothes. It's a good little test of how clean I can be. So once again, a little bit of oil's on. You screw the filter on. It should spin freely. Like, you should be able to take it, spin it. If it doesn't spin freely, it's the wrong filter. Take it off. Get another one. It's the wrong threads. It's going to end bad. The other thing is you can do by either looking up, or you can look at the old filter, which I'll take a look at right now, is once again that O-ring that's sitting right here. Make sure it's there, because if it's not there, it's up there. And if it's up there and you start the engine up, that means it's going to have two rubber seals, and that does not mean double protection. That means that one seal is going to blow out and oil is going to go all over the place. And hopefully it happens at the shop when you're doing it, and not on the road when it blows up an engine. So the best way is to make sure that that seal is still on the old filter. So now, you're going to get it until it makes contact. After it makes contact, some oil filters are a little hotter than the other to get a good grip on. But, plain and simple, what you want to do, by hand only. Okay? No tools. You got that big rubber seal that I was just talking about. That's protecting it from being loosening and from leaking. You don't need to be this big strong guy really yanking it on. You don't need to have the wrench to help you tighten it up. Just make sure that it's tight. In the directions, I think it's like a quarter of a turn or a half a turn after it moves. If you tighten that up too much now, I feel bad if you're the next person taking it off. That's when you're using big pair of pliers. You're actually using a screwdriver to be stuck through the hole. It's a nightmare. So as much as you're thinking you're stopping a leak, you're not. You're just causing a problem. All right, so the oil change is done. There's no oil on the ground. There's no oil on me. This is the point where we will go over more of this when we're here, but you would go through a quick check. Check the tires, check the brakes, check tie rod ends if you have time. This lift is a little bit difficult. It depends on how fast you are at changing the oil. I mentioned this to some, not all, but like I said, when this is an electric vehicle, you really have to check the brakes because the brakes are not used a lot on an electric vehicle. They have what's called regenerative braking, which means the brake pads are not used that much. So, with running around and talking, I'm at 17 minutes and 20 seconds. Not all that bad considering, but right now I'm losing money. So I'm going to let the car down. I'm going to pause the video and we'll get back under the hood. All right, car's down and we're back. So my videos will be better than this. I'm just either waiting for them to give me the camera equipment or for me to bring my own in. But it's just an option. All right, so everything's drained. This is where you would check everything else under the car: air filters, belts, quick with the coolant levels. Which, strangely enough, and we'll get into this more, this car has 3 separate coolant tanks. One for the electronics, one for the engine, and one for the batteries. Okay? A little confusing. So if you're not sure what oil the vehicle takes, 2 options. 1, look in the owner's manual. That's always a good option. 2, it usually says it. So this is 5W20. Check the top of the cap. Take a look if it's all disgusting and gooky and ooey. Usually there's a problem. Water's getting into the engine or coolant's getting into the engine. So always check the owner's manual or check the top of the cap. Don't rely on anybody else. Not it's a big deal, but I ordered oil for this. They sent me 0.20. It actually takes 5.20, not 0.20. And nowadays, what it says on the cap is always what you should put in the engine. Old mechanics would be like, oh, it has high miles, go with thicker oil. It's never a good idea, never. Because the original port size is always the same. Yep, you may have a little bit more wear, but that oil has to get there through the same hole. So if you got this big, thick oil, it's going to have a very hard time getting through that thin hole to get to the component. So you're actually going to cause more wear. It takes longer for the oil to get up to the top of the engine if it's thicker. There's so many reasons, and if it's that bad that you need thicker oil to make it stop making noise, you have other problems. So you always use the original oil. Just saying, the original weight is always the best. Another thing, which is a good idea at all times, don't think you're going to be great at aiming. Once again, you're trying to beat that 15 minutes. If you spill oil all over someone's engine, you have to clean that up before they leave. Otherwise, there's going to be smoke all over the place, and you're going to have one unhappy customer. So, at a dealership or some quick lube place, they're going to have a gun that you grab down and you say, okay, I need 5 quarts. You put it in, it's actually going to read 5 quarts. Some of them automatically shut off when it hits the 5 quarts. Others, it's like pumping gas and you watch it. Here we have actual quarts. So I'm going to put a funnel so I don't spill oil all over the place, okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the quart that I put some with the oil filter, and I'm going to finish putting that in. I will show you the correct way of actually pouring oil out of a quart of oil. Because believe it or not, there is a correct and incorrect way of doing that. So a mobile one is not quite as easy to notice, but there is, it's not in the center, it's on one side or the other, okay? So most people will think, hey, I'm not pour it this way. Actually, you pour it that way. so the air will go in and not cause that bloop, 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 and that splashes oil all over the place. So once again, unfortunate enough, I did not look to see how much oil this took. Another great thing is I could Google it and find out. Except for the fact that right now, I'm talking to you guys on the phone where I would use the Google. So that's not going to work very well. But Google is a great source to find out exactly how much oil you need and a lot of other things. So they sent me 5 quarts of oil. Most cars take, especially 4 cylinders, anywhere between 4 to 5 quarts. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put 4 quarts in. I will actually check the dipstick first, see if that gives me any indication of where I'm at. After that, I will stop the engine up, let it run for 30 seconds or so, and turn it off. Give it another 30 seconds to sit, and then I'll check the oil again. So that would tell me how much oil I have left. Oh, I'm sorry, how much oil I have here. And if I need to add anything. I would always go a little less and a little more the first time, because you don't want to have to pick the car up and drain the oil back out of the system. So there, I put 4 quarts in. The dipstick is in the back. Believe it or not, some new cars no longer have dipsticks. We'll get into that later. So I'm going to wipe it clean. Put it back in. I'm going to pull it back out. And I'm going to read it. And right now, it reads completely full. Okay? So is that going to stay that way? Probably not, because though I put some oil in the oil filter, I did not put a ton in. So I'm going to put that aside. We're going to put the oil cap back on. Some of the old vehicles, some mechanics would not put the oil cap back on. Once again, don't do that nowadays. Make sure everything's set before you start it up. Otherwise, you will probably throw a code. Okay? Taking my gloves off. I am going to go inside of the customer's car. Clean hands. This isn't, oh, all right, it's dirty, but I'm just touching it. No. Gloves off, you're going inside the customer's car. I am now going to start the engine up. Let it run for about anywhere from 10 to 30 seconds. All right, so while the oil's dripping back inside, we can talk about the 2 strange things. One, it's an electric car with a generator. The battery's charged, and somehow I got the engine to start up. How did that happen? So it's called service mode. For an oil change, service mode is very easy. If the hood is open, the engine will run. It automatically goes into service mode with the hood open. I'm sure some of you went, how does it know a hood's open? Well, somewhere on this car, there's a sensor. Usually it's going to be in the hood latch nowadays, which would be right here. Okay, yes, there's a lot of electronics in cars. This car, there's an extreme amount of electronics. Get used to it. That's why you're here. Um, it isn't going back. This is the world we live in. We're going to have to learn how to deal with electronics. Okay? That's why you're here. We're going to have fun doing it. So that's one. Two. This is my old set of gloves. This is my new set of gloves. If you work at a dealership, they will not want you to put your old set of gloves back on. This is what it is. Okay? So everything is about being extremely clean. Seats are covered, floor mats in, steering wheel has a cover on it. You change your gloves to new gloves every time you get in and out of a car. Okay? That might be a little extreme, but for the most part, that theory holds true. I changed oil. You saw me get the oil on my gloves. I filled it. I took the gloves off. We get rid of them. We go into the customer's car. We are clean. My hands are clean. I start it up. I let the car run. Now, I'm going to check the oil. Technically, I'll probably get a little oil in these gloves. I would end up taking the gloves off when it's time to go pull the car out and reset the oil light. In today's world, right now, they're probably going to want you to take these gloves off, put another set of gloves on to drive the customer's car out because they physically don't want you touching the car. That is depending on the policy. And here right now, if we do have a customer's car, that is my policy. So you will have a new set of gloves to drive the customer's car out. Okay? It's right now for germs just as much as it is to keep the customer's cars clean. But you need, if there's nothing else that you get out of this class, being clean is going to be the number one thing. So right now I'm going to check the oil. I'm going to say it might be 1/4 of a quart low. So checking the oil, wipe it off. When the engine starts up, it splashes oil all over the place. So you're not going to get a good reading unless you wipe it. Put it back in, pull it back out. If I look, good luck on seeing that. I don't think. Anyway, I'm not going to waste all the time in the world. It is 1/4 of a quart low. Okay, the reason why I guessed that is I had to put, I put some oil in the oil filter. So usually that type of oil filter takes 1/2 quart. I figured I probably got about 1/4 quart into it, and I was going to need to put another 1/4 quart in. Once again, funnel. Don't play around. You're going to miss. Maybe not this time, maybe not next time, but you're going to miss. So we're going to open up the last quart. It does have a little measuring thing here, okay? So there you go, about 1/4 quart. Put the cap back on. This is just for yourself. If you make a mess on your own floor, you're gonna have to clean it. Problem is if you step on the oil later, you can get into a customer's car. Put the cap back on. It's these little things that make all the difference. And it's these little tiny things that employees look for. Cap back on. Once again, pull, wipe. I know it's a little weird, but always make sure it's dry. Put it back in. And check, and it's right on the full line. So, once again, check all your fluids quickly. You should be doing this through the whole process. You should check your air cleaner. You can kind of go by mileage on that. I ordered an air cleaner for this one. I didn't check it. I went by the mileage. It has 60,000 miles on it. I don't know how many miles it has on the engine yet. I have to hook it up to the computer. It has 60,000 total miles, but I figured, why not put an air cleaner in it? But usually you can, if the car has 10,000 miles on it, doesn't need to have an air filter check. Not unless you live in an extremely dusty area. I might just take my rag, which I wipe my hands with, I did all that, and I just might do this. And just wipe the stuff down. It takes a second, if you have a second. What's it doing? It's not really doing much, besides if your customer opens up the hood of the car, they're like, hey, it's clean. It wasn't that clean before. It is now. It's just those little things that make that much of a difference. So the oil change is done, everything's checked. The only thing I don't think I have here is windshield washer fluid. Always top that off when you're doing an oil change. It's another thing that makes customers, they don't even realize it, but they'll realize it if you didn't do it. So if I left here and 2 days from now, my windshield washer fluid light came on saying it was low, I was like, didn't I just get an oil change? They could have told me that. Just add it. It's not something, it's not no one's gonna come and shake your hand saying you did it, but everybody's gonna come and say you didn't. That's the easiest way to explain that one. So everything's done here. That's the end of that video. I'm gonna take my gloves off. I will reset the oil light in that car, and that way everything's different. So it depends on the car you do is how you reset the oil light. So I'm not gonna show you, that's more of an in-person thing. But if you have a car that you're doing an oil change with and you don't know how to reset the light, two things, you ready? Owner's manual, Google, both of them will work. The oil reset light is always in the owner's manual, okay? So that's it for now. See you next time.